Okay, morning everybody. Welcome back. It is Friday, so we've survived another week in quarantine. So give yourself a pat on the back for that. Before we continue on to today's lecture, I got a few things I want to say. Thank you for those who are continuing to do your written responses, the projects, and handing in the booklets. Keep them coming. They're all really good. One thing I would like to mention though is when you share me the project or whatever, consider that like being when you give it to me in person. Like you're giving me the finished product, because some of you have given me the projects or things that you've continued to work on it afterwards. I kind of mark what you give me and then I don't look at it again. And that might be a bad thing because you may have filled in the rest. So give it to me when it's finished, obviously. Don't just give it to me when you're halfway through. That's really helpful for me so that I don't mark it and then just leave it and then you go back and you finish it. So there's that. And also, please make sure you're still doing the quizzes. Those are still a thing. They never close, and you can do them as many times as you like. So just keep doing those as well. I believe that is it. If there's any questions that you have about anything coming up, let me know. The rest of this unit, we'll just go through it, and then when we get to the end, we're going to do a project and then the written response, and that'll be how we'll do the next two units afterwards, and then we'll be finished. So you're almost there. Okay. But let's get back to what we've been talking about. So we are on student activity 25. This is page 10 of the booklet and slide 30 if you're following along in the presentation. So we are still talking about ultranationalism and the start of the Second World War. So yesterday we talked about the rise of the Soviet Union. We were introduced to Joseph Stalin, the Bolsheviks, and the industrialization of the Soviet Union. We were also introduced to the famine that came because of it. So if you remember yesterday, Joseph Stalin was using the grain from the Ukraine to basically pay for industrial goods to come to Russia. So Ukraine being isolated, no one was going in, no one was going out. They were basically starving the people. So that's really what was happening at the time. So now we are going to go a little bit further. We were introduced on Tuesday, I believe, to Mussolini, Hirohito, and Adolf Hitler. So we have all the major players in Europe introduced and established. So now we're going to look at today's question of how did World War II start? The terms that we're going to introduce today is appeasement, Axis, and then, this isn't a term, but something you should be aware of, the fall of Poland. Because Poland is the first country to be invaded in the Second World War. So it starts with Poland. Okay, so slide 32 has a bunch of dates. These dates are important to remember because it helps to create a sort of timeline of events that lead up to the war and then introduced the war itself. So we saw the rise of the dictator in places all over, but this focuses a lot on Italy and Germany. So 1929 is the start of the Great Depression. We saw that it hits America first and then ripples into every other country outside of North America included as well. 1933, Germany withdraws from the League of Nations. So we saw in 1933 the rise of Adolf Hitler legally, and he takes Germany out of the League of Nations. 1934, the Nazis assume full control of Germany, and then they begin what's called the Night of the Long Knives in June 1934. Essentially, the Night of the Long Knives was Hitler's getting rid of anybody who was against him. It was to take them, arrest them, execute them by any means to consolidate power behind him. So anybody who was in opposition was killed. 1935, in March, Hitler announces rearmament, announces the creation of an air force, and begins conscription. So he's going against what the Treaty of Versailles had said, but no one is really challenging him on it. In 1935, again, in May, Mussolini invades Ethiopia. We saw that a few days ago. The invasion of Ethiopia, or Abyssinia as it was called then, and Italy assumes control over Ethiopia, and again, the League of Nations, and nobody could really do anything about it. In 1936, Hitler and Mussolini sign a treaty and essentially create what is known as the Axis powers. It's essentially an alliance between the two countries. Moving on, we go to 1937. Japan will join the Axis powers. So the ultranationalists that we talked about on Tuesday, they've all come together and they've all joined forces because they all are essentially acting the same way. They all have the same characteristics. So that is in 1937. Something that's not on here that I would like to just make you aware of, and if you find it interesting and you want to continue looking into it, then I will give you some resources for it. In 1936, in Spain, we have the Spanish Civil War starting. The Spanish Civil War starts between the government, the very left-leaning socialist-style government, and the very right ultranationalist military. They begin a civil war between each other, and then we will see people like Hitler and Mussolini go and send in supplies to the ultranationalists in Spain to help turn Spain into essentially a fascist country too. Spain does not doesn't participate in the Second World War. They are an ally of Germany though, so that's just something that's happening as well that you should be aware of too. Okay, so back to the list. 1938, Germany joins with Austria. This is known as the Anschluss. The Austrians willingly join. That was one of the stipulations in the Treaty of Versailles, and again, nobody does anything to stop it. 1938, Czechoslovakia is partitioned, so that means parts of Czechoslovakia are taken away, and they are given to Germany. And it is essentially agreed upon at the conference in Munich in 1938. So this Munich conference, or the Munich Agreement, was signed between Italy, Germany, France, and England, or Great Britain. And they all agreed that Germany would have access to parts of parts of Czechoslovakia known as the Sudetenland. This land was occupied, or was where the majority of Germans living in Czechoslovakia lived. And that was given to them. This sort of agreement, this conference, is what embodies the idea of appeasement, giving in to Hitler to prevent war from happening. So the idea of appeasement is to prevent war from starting, and that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to give Hitler a lot of what he wants so that war can be prevented. But it's not going to be so. In 1939, in March, France and Britain guarantee Polish independence. Poland is seen as the next target because if you remember the map that we looked at the start of this unit, Poland has a corridor to the ocean, to the sea, and they have the seaport of Danzig. That separates big Germany from this little part of Germany that's called East Prussia. The Germans want to have East Prussia connected to Germany, so they're asking for the port of Danzig back. The Poles are saying no. So the French and the British, they realize that that's probably his next move. We will guarantee that there will be an independent Poland. In May 1939, Italy and Germany signed the Pact of Steel, essentially agreeing that should something happen, we got each other's back. In 1939, in August, the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, they signed an agreement called the Non-Aggression Pact. Essentially, they won't be aggressive towards each other. They won't invade each other. They'll let each other do their own things, but never have to worry about the other. This shocks the world because they had seen the Nazis and the Soviets as being mortal enemies. And now we have Hitler and Stalin coming together and agreeing to work together. And this is what brings about September 1st, 1939, Germany will invade Poland. They start the war by invading. So that means on September 3rd, just 2 days later, France and Britain declare war on Germany, and the war is going to begin. September 10th, Canada declares war on Germany, so we wait about 8 more days. The reason that we're allowed to wait 8 more days is because between World War I and World War II, 1935 to be exact, the Treaty of Westminster is declared, allowing Canada a lot more autonomy, a lot more say in what we do. And one of the things that we're allowed to do is to decide who we are going to go to war with. But obviously, we agree to help support England because we are still a part of the Commonwealth. So that is a good timeline that starts. It outlines the start of the Second World War. If there's some things that didn't make sense in that, please let me know, and I'll address those either via email or in the comment section. So let's move on. So we're going to talk about the fall of Poland, because one thing that people they forget is because Germany, all of its stuff was taken away. Its navy, its military was limited. Its armaments were taken away. Its navy, all of this stuff was taken away at the Treaty of Versailles. It was allowed to rebuild things, so it had all brand new equipment. That's what really helped them to be so lethal in the early years of the war. So before we talk about the fall of Poland, I want you to look at this map on slide 33. Each one of those areas that we've talked about in that timeline is present. So in 1936, the Rhineland is remilitarized. The Sudetenland, the land that was given in the Munich Agreement, and then Austria in March 1930, like we talked about, is joined to Germany. So the Anschluss, is created. So because Hitler had signed an agreement with Stalin, he felt comfortable in attacking Poland. And what also happens is Poland is having to fight the Nazis on the one front, and then also the Soviets decide to invade on the other side, and they take half of Poland. Essentially, where the Bug River is essentially will be the new border between the German side and the Soviet side. So France and Britain swear to protect Polish sovereignty. When Germany invades, they have to declare war. And then German invasion happens quick. And it destroys the Polish army relatively quickly because it has this new style of war. You may have heard of it. It's known as the Blitzkrieg or Lightning War. Essentially, what it looks like is first planes, bombers will go first. They drop bombs and they will do as much damage as they can to wipe out people, defenses, etc. Then behind that goes tanks and armored vehicles, and they go very quickly. And then behind that is the army. So they're there. The foot soldiers are there to clean up after the armored forces. They go first. When they invade Poland, Poland is obviously unprepared. They're actually still using horses and soldiers carrying spears on these horses too, lances. Yes, they have some planes. Yes, they have some tanks, some machine guns, but they're completely overwhelmed by the Germans. And it doesn't help that the Soviets invade from the other side, and then Poland is gone. Poland ceases to exist. So it took 10 days for Poland to be defeated, and there was a lot of casualties. We're talking about 66,300 killed, 133,700 wounded, 70,000 to 100,000 escaped, and 420,000 prisoners. And then, as opposed to the German side, the casualties ranged from 8 to 10,000 killed, 27 to 30,000 wounded, and 3,000 to 5,000 missing. So when you look at casualties on both sides, the Poles suffered tremendously. and we are going to revisit the Polish people again because they will suffer a lot at the hands of the Germans. So that's the aggression from the Nazis. The Soviets as well are going to start to act aggressively, and it helps that they have an agreement with the Nazis, the now dominant force in Europe. So the Soviets decide to pick on a target that's vulnerable, and they pick Finland. So Finland is a relatively new country, and the Soviets thought it would be an easy target to attack. So November in 1939, the Soviets launch an attack on Finland because it used to be a part of the Russian Empire. The Finns resist fiercely, and they're actually able to stop the Soviets from advancing too much. The reason that the Soviets have such a hard time invading Finland has to do with what's happening in the Soviet Union. It happened 2 years before, and it was still going on in 1939. Hitler had the Night of the Long Knives. Stalin had the Great Purges. So Stalin went through people in government, people in high military rank, civilians, anybody. And anybody that he thought was an enemy or could be an enemy or had sympathies towards anything, they were executed. So it included a lot of high-ranking military officials, which doesn't help your military when you kill all the smart ones. So the Soviets really had a hard time invading Finland. It should have been easy, but there was a lot of resistance. It also helps that they invaded Finland, so the Finns were using, they had knowledge of the territory and had tactics to be able to beat off the Soviet invasion. In February 1940, the Red Army brings its full strength to push the Finns back. So this is when things start to go better for the Soviets. The British and the French, they attempt to send aid to Finland, but they're not allowed because they were going to do that through the channels of Norway and Sweden, but they deny it because they're both neutral. They don't want to be involved in the war. So Finland is forced to surrender and gives territory to the Russians. So if you're looking on the map on slide 36, the shaded in bits, these are the territories that the Soviets annex. However, there is some fallout from this little war, which is known as the Winter War. It's obvious that the Finns are actually pretty competent soldiers because they are able to fight off the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union performs pretty bad, and Hitler has his eye on that because Hitler's ultimate dream and the dream of the Nazi ideology is this idea of, it's known as Lebensraum, living area or living space for the German people. And Hitler has his eyes on the East. Eastern Europe, so basically the Soviet Union. That's where he envisions this new land for the German people to live. So he has his eyes on the Soviet Union, and he saw how badly they fought against the Finns, and he thought, well, the Finnish army is not as strong and well equipped as the Germans, so perhaps we can in the future take out Russia. And it also demonstrates the difficulty of fighting a mechanized war in winter. So most of this is fought during the winter time, hence the name, the Winter War. So things like tanks, things like armored vehicles and planes, they were utterly useless. So it was a lot. This war was fought a lot between both armies, so soldier versus soldier. This is something that Hitler should have paid attention to. We'll get to that when we'll get to that in a few years into the war. So on slide 37, there is a 3-minute video of the Winter War. It's worth having a watch. And then on slide 38, you're going to be introduced to this man called Simo Häyhä. I don't know if I'm saying his name right or not. He was given the nickname the White Death because he fought for the Finnish army in the Winter War. And he was a sniper. And he is credited with killing over 500 Soviet soldiers during the winter. So in that year, he shoots and kills 500 soldiers. So he's considered a national hero in Finland. If you look at a picture of him, you're gonna see his face is sort of messed up. It is so because he got shot in the face, and there was shrapnel in his cheek. So he lived with those scars for the rest of his life. He actually lived quite a long life. He died in 2002 at the age of 96. So he is a national hero for the Finnish people during the Winter War. So yes, the Finns do lose the Winter War, but they do show some fighting spirit. And later on in the war, they actually will join in an alliance with the Germans. So, continuing on, we're going to look at Canada and the initial phases of the war. So the Canadian Army began transportation to Britain in December 1939. At the start of the war in 1939, it's just England, France, and Canada against the Germans and the Italians. Other countries have not yet joined the war. Sorry, that's my daughter. She's crying, so give her a second. The government, the prime minister of the time was William Lyle Mackenzie King, and he wanted a limited war, so not a repeat of World War I. He saw, because he was obviously there, that the war lasted quite a long time, and many Canadian soldiers were actually they were killed because of the war. So he's thinking to himself that he does not want a repeat of the war. I'm sorry. She's having she's having a moment, so I apologize. So by spring, General McNaughton has a full division awaiting orders. So relatively quickly, things are things are going great. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm just give me a second. She's really upset. So back to what I was saying. General McNaughton has a full division awaiting orders. Only one squadron of pilots of the Royal Canadian Air Force, because a lot of them are joined the British Air Force. So what a lot of places, people from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and England, they've gone to Canada. They've come to Canada to train as pilots, and then they go back and they join the RAF, so the Royal Air Force. So that's why there's very limited Royal Canadian Air Force presence, because a lot of them actually joined the RAF. So they crossed the Channel in June 1940. There is a army. We'll talk about it. There is an army that is in an expeditionary army that is in France. That is it is a British army. In 1940, the Germans are going to invade France and Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg, and they are wiping through them fast. So the British send an army there to help keep France from falling, and Canadians are involved. So Canadians are only fully equipped division in Britain. So the British have sent all their army to help in France. So Canada is actually the only army there defending the British Islands. So that's pretty interesting to note. Moving on. What's known as the Phoney War. So a little activity on the Western Front until the spring of 1940. In the meantime, though, Germany has occupied Denmark and it has invaded Norway. So Swedish iron ore is vital to the German military production. So they invade Norway and secure ports for shipment. The French and the British attempt to intervene, but Germany is too powerful at the moment. They occupy Norway rapidly, and they are actually supported by the pro-Nazis in that country. So, at the start of the war, the Nazis have actually invaded quite a lot of countries, and they've occupied them fairly quickly. And it's all thanks to this idea of the Blitzkrieg War. So we've seen Poland has fallen, Denmark, Norway. Eventually, we're going to see the Netherlands, Belgium, and then France as well. But we'll get to that later. So, if we're looking at the question, how did World War II start? Well, it has its seeds in the Treaty of Versailles, and then the Great Depression, it fuels things. So when we talked about the rise of ultranationalism and those crises, the political crisis, the economic crisis, and the social crisis, those sort of things all are happening in this time. The social crisis happens in Germany because of the Treaty of Versailles. The economic crisis happens 1929 with the Great Depression. The political crisis happens when the Nazis become a political party, a legitimate political party, and they take control of the country. So that's just focusing on Germany. Japan and Italy also had their crisis, and same with Russia. So we have the rise of ultranationalism and this belief that each of these countries should seek greatness. So ultimately, this is what's going to start the First World War. So that timeline is actually really important, and I would keep an eye on that timeline for sure when talking about how did World War II start. I will try to find a video to put in about the Spanish Civil War because I feel like it's important and you should be aware of it. And that's it for today. Keep working on things. Keep working on the booklets. That's it. Have a good weekend. Have a good rest of Friday. Try not to work too much because I sure won't. I'm just kidding. And then I'll see you on Monday with a brand new video. Okay? Stay safe and I'll see you then.